Hello, welcome to Active Engagement and Participation. My name is Shauna Montgomery, and I'm an educational consultant with the CAIU in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. My colleague Jerry Schaefer and I have developed the following module as part of the Tier 2 Assistive Technology Process. This process was designed to build capacity in AT within local school districts and cooperating agencies. Each module is designed to provide information about best practice in AT. Throughout this module, you'll be asked to stop and complete reflection activities located on the Google form you received with the training video. These activities are required for members of our AT teams in order to receive credit for completing each step of the tiered training. When you see this slide during the module, you will be prompted to pause your video and complete the corresponding activity. Let's get started. The purpose of this module is to get you thinking about active engagement in the context of assistive technology. Dr. Anita Archer's work deals primarily with active participation and engagement. Let's take a look at a short clip of Dr. Archer explaining what active engagement means.
All instruction has to be interactive. I say something, you say something, I say something, you say something, I write something, you write something, I do something, you do something, I say something, you say something. It never can be. I say something, 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 I say something. See you tomorrow. Raise your hand if some of your children, under those circumstances, might check out. Raise your hand if that might happen. So that's what we're going to discuss, is how to have that great engagement through active participation. But you know, it's even possible that some of your thoughts might go somewhere else today. So we're going to do the same active participation here that you would do in your class.
You may be wondering why we are talking about active engagement in an assistive technology module. The reason is that students need to be actively engaged in their learning to facilitate remembering what they have learned. This is true for students with assistive technology too. This has direct application for students who are learning to use AT tools because they need to be actively engaged in the learning surrounding the tool and how to use it effectively. It also applies to the classroom environment. Opportunities for authentic use of AT in the classroom are more meaningful when they happen within a lesson related to the instructional content. This means that students will need to be actively engaged in the instruction happening in their classroom in order to use their AT in a meaningful way. Active engagement leads to participation and learning. If you think about your own learning experiences, you can probably identify some that were more impactful to you than others. If you think about it, the experiences that you enjoyed more and that you remembered the most of most likely included engagement activities where you were doing things like moving around the room, talking to others, writing, reading, or in some way responding and not just sitting and listening. Deeper learning also occurs when you are making connections to information you already know, digging deeper into a topic, solving problems using what you are learning, and creating meaning out of the new material. Think about your students and your classroom or setting. What are ways that students can be active within your classroom? What does active engagement look like when you're with your student population? For students with disabilities, engagement activities may need to be tailored to their functional capabilities, but should also involve appropriate activities and engaging cognitive tasks. Take a minute to identify how students are active in your setting and what actionable steps you could take to increase active engagement with your students. Please pause the video and complete question 1 on the Google form. As you identify more ways to increase active engagement with your students, remember that active engagement is not requiring students to raise their hand to speak, say please or thank you all the time, or responding in a complete sentence. That is not to say that these tasks don't have their place in a student's learning, but they are more about the adult's demands than the student's learning needs. No matter where you and your students are in the continuum of active engagement, the goal is always to be moving toward greater engagement. If you think about engagement as a continuum, it can be helpful in identifying where you are now and then set a goal to increase the active engagement. Don't get me wrong, keeping students engaged is not always easy and requires thought and planning. Engaging students with disabilities can come with additional challenges due to the nature and range of disabilities within a single classroom. So the idea of engagement as a continuum may be helpful in setting obtainable goals for increasing engagement. The question we need to answer is how. How do we actively engage the students in our classroom? There are strategies such as using visual supports, planning the timing of instruction so that students are learning the material when they are most receptive, etc. But when it comes to working with learners who have disabilities, there is one place to start, and that's presuming competence. We have to start by presuming competence in our students and having the mindset that they can engage in rigorous learning. This has to be learning at their developmental level, but it must be learning that is rigorous and relevant. In order to help direct our thinking about presuming competence, we are going to consider some statements about this topic and then reflect on how this would look in your setting. The principle of presuming competence is simply to act as Annie Sullivan did. Assume that a child has intellectual ability, provide opportunities to be exposed to learning, assume the child wants to learn, and assert him or herself in the world. To not presume competence is to assume that some individuals cannot learn, develop, or to participate in the world. Presuming competence is nothing less than a Hippocratic oath for all educators. And that's a quote by Douglas Bicklin. To presume competence is to acknowledge that all individuals have the ability to learn, to communicate, to participate in their own way. It means that we provide opportunities by creating accessible and inclusive spaces. To presume competence is to respect the value of human diversity. Not presuming competence is to actively harm. And this was taken from the Autism Women's Network. And finally, a 6-year-old was quoted as saying, "My teacher thought I was smarter than I was, so I was." It's time to reflect about what this would look like in your setting. Please pause the video and complete question 2 on the Google form. When we are planning for active engagement, we can divide academics up into 3 categories. In each of these categories, we can ask and answer some questions to help us target the type of information and activities that will help us engage our students. First is content and curriculum. This is where we look at how we engage our students' minds in the information. We can do this through rigorous learning. Is it going to interest them or teach them something that they need to know? How can we make the content worth the student's time? Grade level content. Are they accessing information that their grade level peers are also learning? This ties back to the state assessment, and even the PASA, the Pennsylvania Alternate Assessment, requires students to know grade level content and skills. Accessible materials. Can the students access the information? Are the materials within the curriculum appropriate for your students' needs or abilities? And universal design for learning. What are the barriers within the content? And how can the principles of UDL be applied to help? The next is planning instruction. How do we engage our students' mind in the lesson? We start by setting goals. What do we want the students to learn? This is like the essential question, and it can be different for each student. We also need to essentialize information. How do we bring the content to our students' level? It's not about finding things that our students can do and then practicing them relentlessly. We need to break down the content or alternate eligible content so that it is digestible for our students. And we can utilize AT resources. How do we make the content more accessible? We can use visual, auditory, kinesthetic supports. Some examples of this are alternative pencils or accessible text. Teachers need to have a plan because if they're spending time during class figuring out how to have the text read to the student, they're going to lose the student's interest and need to work twice as hard to get it back. The third category is engagement strategies. So how do we keep students active during instruction? Well, we need to plan to process. We need to figure in time and activities for how and when students are going to be active within the lesson. We have to choose our strategies. We have to know what engagement strategies are and which ones we will try. And we have to make adaptations. How can we make these strategies work for our kids? This is a good time to stop and think about how we can plan for engagement. Please pause the video and complete question 3 on the Google form. Engaging students includes helping them to be active in developing their executive function skills. Executive function has 3 major components of working memory, cognitive flexibility, and inhibitory control. So what kinds of skills are included in these components? It includes things like making plans, tracking time, managing multiple things or activities at once, evaluating ideas, making corrections while working, finishing work on time, and knowing when and how to seek information or help. This information is available online from the Executive Function Fact Sheet at the LD Online website. Some things that we can use to work on each of these areas can be games or activities that build skill in each area. These activities are examples that came directly from the Executive Function Activity Guide, which is also a link that will be available in the live binder. And the other resources can also be helpful for finding out more about executive function and engaging activities to work on these skills. Take some time to think about your class and which of these areas you'd like to target with your students. Please pause the video and complete question 4 on the Google form. When it comes to active engagement, communication plays an important role. It can be a complex and sometimes overwhelming concept. In this visual, I've broken down the 3 main areas we're going to focus on for AT and active engagement. The first is vocabulary. In order for students to successfully use AT, they need access to words that are meaningful and powerful. Using a combination of core vocabulary, such as words like go, like, want, fringe words, words like home, pizza, juice, and social words such as hi, bye, or help. Students should be able to formulate their own thoughts and ideas. The second is language. We can't forget to develop language skills for all students, especially those using AT. Enrichment is always a good place to start. Try to set up activities that give students experience with language, practice building sentences, and use reading and writing activities. The third is social communication. What are the rules for communicating with a partner? Take time to teach and reinforce listening skills, model feedback, and how to repair a message that was misunderstood. Identify what you are expecting the students to know and do. Model the words you want to use. Activities should enrich the student about the topic. Find opportunities to be social and talk to peers. Here are some ideas to get you started in these 3 areas. They are interchangeable. Obviously, everything needs vocabulary, language, and a social component. The words at the top represent a few functions of communication. Why is the student communicating? Superflex is a program from Michelle Garcia Winner, and I will put it in the live binder so that you can access that as well. So use this example to draft a lesson plan on your choice of topic. Please pause the video and complete question 5 on the Google form. Here are some resources to explore related to active engagement. These links are available on the live binder so you can find them easily. Thank you for taking the time to complete Module 2. If you have any questions about this module or would like to discuss your role in the AT process, Please feel free to email or call us by visiting our CAIU Assistive Technology website at the link on the screen. Please also remember that AT consultants are available for in-person training and consultation with your team.